to dry land again, and then we were able to drive in. But we were here, I think, about 2 weeks getting ready for camp. The staff all came in, and I might say that Orly was the biggest help of any a guy could possibly have, because he knew how to take charge of things. We worked out a program for the first campers that came in. Everybody had a job. All the staff people had a job. One was to meet them, you know, at the gate, send them to the doctor, all these things. Everybody was all ready. Night before they were to come in, we had a deluge, and we got up in the morning, didn't think too much about it. They had just finished pouring the cement on the lodge floor there. So in order to put my desk in there, we had to put in cardboard cartons, folded up, you know, or laid out flat, so it wouldn't dig into the cement too much, and so on. Well, we got all ready to go, waiting for these troops to come in. And we waited and waited. It rained all night. And the morning was pretty good, but everything was pretty wet. And nobody came. And finally, Boots decided he better find out what was going on. So he took the Jeep and went out till he couldn't get any farther. And there was a lineup of cars about, must have been 100 yards long, or more than that. Must have been about 25 or 30 cars, you know, troops trying to get in here. They were all stuck. The first one was stuck.
All with overburdened trailers.
Was that?
All with overburdened trailers.
Yeah, trailers and buses and so on. And
4 over-the-road buses.
Then we got, I don't know who you had driving the truck. We had a truck with chains on, and the Jeep, and
Tractor.
something else.
Tractor.
They went out and they started pulling them in.
They were all chained together. All 3 vehicles were chained together.
Yeah. And boy, what a mess that was. And it was midnight before we got them all in here. And here we just wrecked our plans completely. Couldn't follow out anything that we planned on. Not only that, but the night before, the pump didn't work, and Chip Rasmussen, was that his name? The cook? No.
Elliot.
Came, he was going to quit. He was going to throw up the sponge. He said he
threw the cleaver at the wall.
This was the night before that we expect this big crowd of campers. And I did everything except get down on my knees and beg them to stick around. Because I think something got stuck in the water, the drain, but it sort of flooded in here. You know. So we finally got him convinced he should stick around. And everything happened all at one time. Mainly the weather. That
was a good year.
That first summer you operated 2 camps in the present Buckskin area and 3?
Yeah,
and they had different names than now.
Yeah.
Buckskin, 10 Chiefs.
No, it wasn't 10 Chiefs.
It wasn't 10 Chiefs then, it was Ranger.
And Pioneer.
And Pioneer.
Right.
How many sites were there?
How many sites? Well, there was those 3, and then there were, what was it? I don't know.
None at the start.
But it wasn't working yet.
The troops had to cut their own sites.
Right.
Go out here into the bush back by the Little Beaver Lakes. Go into the thickest part of the brush that you can today. And that's what this whole thing was like when the first troops rolled in here. And we took them out and we said, "This is your campsite." And they looked around and they couldn't even see sky. And they carved it out.
Pat White came out here in 1946 with, I think it was 50 kids.
Yeah, 40.
And they camped down on the right-hand side, way down towards the end. The first night they pitched their tents along the road, and they were there for a couple of nights. And the next time I went down there, all you saw was Pat White's tent and an old black coffee can sitting alongside of him. I said, Pat, where's your kids? See that trail there? You follow that, you'll find a patrol up there. Follow this trail and you'll find another one up there. They were all scattered all through the woods. And there was two smart kids, they had some bright idea. They found 4 popple trees. You couldn't have planted them in a square. And every day they'd shinny up and tie logs across, and they got way up the top, and they built a platform, they camped up there. We got pictures of it.
Were there any major problems that first summer?
Not a one.
I think that answers itself.
Yeah, getting up every morning, facing it.
Well, I think what ought to be said about that though, seriously, is that that first difficult summer, because the contractor was behind schedule and we ran into bad weather and some other things. That first summer, however, created an attitude, frame of mind in the staff of can do. And the fellows that made up the staff in that first summer maintained a high morale and had an attitude of there's nothing that can lick us, we can do anything, and they did. And we really, despite all of the problems that there were in opening this camp, we had a great first season.
I think that's certainly something that remains true with the staff throughout the years. Why was the Sea Scout base and the Air Base not open? Was it lack of people to use it, or because that was on the original plan?
Well, there were a number of things on the original plan that never really happened, and as I told you, I brought along some of the original drawings that I'll share with you before we get out of here. But you know, you can do almost anything if you have enough money, and with the problems of inflation after the war, why it just wasn't possible for the Minneapolis Council to go ahead with those projects, and that's the reason. The ideas are still, I feel, good ideas, and the land is still there, and they provided also for a rich experience in the Tamarack Wildlife Refuge, which in the early years we never got maximum usage out of, and maybe we haven't ever gotten maximum usage out of that 177,000 acres to this day. But there were a number of things. I think the thing that needs to be remembered about this camp is that the plans for it, the buildings that were built, didn't just happen. There was a purpose for every single building that was built on the camp. It was supposed to achieve a very special objective. And if you take, for example, the Gate Lodge out there is a good example of it, which was built by Siebert. The idea of the Gate Lodge was twofold. It was supposed to do two very important things. One, it was supposed to create a feeling on the part of the arriving scout and leader that they had arrived. And so you drove up to the gate, which was always closed at that time. You drove up to the gate, and a scout in uniform, and I mean in uniform,
Sharp.
sharp uniform, neckerchief, everything, came out and asked you who you were, welcomed you, and to Many Point Scout Camp, asked the number of your troop and the name of the leader who was with them, and then they opened the gate and started to drive in the 3 miles from the gate.
Oh,
And we had an old telephone out there, a telephone line that ran in here, and the scout out there, 2 of them, would call on the old crank telephone and say that troop number so-and-so was on its way in under the leadership of this scout leader, so that when they arrived here in the administration area, somebody could walk out and say, "Hello, Mr. Johnson, we're glad to see you." And so that they felt that they had arrived at the place and that it was the place that they had been looking forward to. The other very important function, and maybe the most important function of the Gate Lodge, was that it was part of a 10 experiences that a camp staff member was supposed to have as a counselor in training. The experience that we had with hiring people to be a part of the camp staff was that we'd hire somebody to be a water master, or we'd hire somebody to be a nature guide, and they probably would have the skills to do that particular thing, but they had no appreciation for and no empathy for what was happening in the rest of the camp. And so the counselor and training program that we devised, there were then 5 operating periods to the camp. And in the first year of the camp, first year of the counselor's training in the camp, he moved every 2 weeks to a new experience. He spent 2 weeks on the waterfront, 2 weeks at the conservation lodge, 2 weeks, and maybe you still do that kind of thing. And then the next year, he had 5 additional experiences. So that by the time he had reached an age of 18 years of age and was eligible for a position on the staff, he had had an experience in the kitchen, in the maintenance shop, in the administration building, down on the waterfront, and so he had some empathy and understanding for the problems of every other member of the staff. And so he was a well-balanced leader, and one of those experiences was that they spent 2 weeks out there in the wilderness of the Gate Lodge, welcoming troops into camp, but also so that they would have some understanding of the importance of having quiet time for contemplation and for reading. And each of them who went out there had an assignment to read a couple of books and to do a project related to planning in the camp. And they turned this in at the end of their 2-week stay out there. And really, I guess to shortcut what it was all about, although we didn't say it this way to them, it was kind of giving them a taste of the kind of experience that Thoreau had at Walden Pond.
Excuse me, I think went to put it into perspective, this was the first time that there was a planned development curriculum of this sort that ever was founded in American Scouting. It was right here. And one of the ingredients was that these young people that Winter's talking about, in every one of those 10 experiences was always under the gaze of an assigned senior staff member. And they were there to learn to be examples to the scouts and the troops. They were something that the scouts and the troops could look up to and say, gee, I'd like to be like that. And that does something for the scouts and the troop, but it also does something for the starting up camp staff member. A very important sense of self-worth. And for years, most of the key spots in this camp were filled from guys that came up from it. And those jobs were never, like in some fraternities and so forth, for the young people coming on board, there was no indulging in subtle forms of hazing, you know, giving them the junk jobs and the crappy things to do. Although there were those jobs to be done. That wasn't the purpose of the seasoning, and that wasn't the method of the seasoning. It was there to be an example.
Maury, with your background in aquatics, could you say a few words about the waterfront? And in the first few years, I understand that it was a differing of opinions apparently with the American Red Cross on the handling of the waterfront.
If there was, I never heard of it because we followed, I was with the Red Cross as well as Boy Scouts and YMCA, and I never heard of any difference with the handling. I mean, we use the same
The buddy system.
buddy system, absolutely. I think it started, well, it did start with Captain Mills, you know, of the Boy Scouts. He's the one that started that originally, way back in about 1920, 21, somewhere like that. I've never heard of any difference, have you?
Things that, no, not, didn't they have to erase that part?
Maybe I can help out.
Yes, if
Maybe I
you
can
could
help out.
expand.
I think that a lot of the discussion so far brings back warm memories, and they're easy to think about because we can relate them to the physical property and the buildings and how tough the weather was and so forth. But there was a thing called program. We first of all had a philosophy and a policy that said our product in this camp is going to be good scout troops that will have the ability to live through the years in an alien environment back in the cities and in the suburbs. That's our product, is to produce troops. And the unit of camping, therefore, is the troop and the patrol and not the individual boy. Now that was a radical departure in American camping. The whole American Camping Association looked askance at that. The idea of outdoor education for a troop as a unit. Now once you set that idea in mind, then, as Wentz said, you begin to build the physical properties to implement and to facilitate that kind of proposition. From that came the idea that, like individual people, there are some troops that are pretty immature, and pretty unskilled. And so you better give them a startup experience where they have maximum support in the pattern of troop camping. And then there's some troops that are pretty good. And then there's some troops that are very good, and there's some troops that are completely autonomous and independent. And so we built then a staging series of places down the lake where a troop could grow up in and from and always have an ambition to get to do it themselves. Now, coming back to the waterfront thing. In American Scout camping, it always was that the entire program of the camp revolved around the waterfront, and anybody can understand that, logistically. Because all the guppies who can't swim should go from the camp together to the waterfront and get training from the waterfront instructor in how to do the rudiments of swimming, and so on up the line. And then you had a life-saving class for the whole camp and so forth. But stop to think for a moment at what you were going to do to the life structure of a troop if every hour of the day some slice of competence in whatever skill is snipped out of the troop operating structure, and you send all the little kids down to the waterfront for this hour, and then all the medium-aged kids down to the water. Well, where then is the integrity of the team experience of a troop? And the American Red Cross operated that way. And this was the first place, I believe, in the whole United States, where a troop that was beginning would go to the water site and go to the watermaster, and they would do these things as a troop on the waterfront. And that was part of the staged experience. Later on, when they went down there, the watermaster came to them and they developed their own swimming site. See? An example of this step series of troop unit development. That was carried out in eating. When they came down here, why, with great difficulty and sorrow, they prepared their own breakfast. But they always ate lunch and dinner here in the dining room to relieve that strain in troop operation. As they went down to the next area, why, 2 of the meals were brought to them, pre-prepared, but they did them at their own campsite. And farther down, they did all their own cooking. And they came back to the store, back to the country store, to buy their provisions, just like they would do if they were on the frontier. So everything that was done in the programmatics of the camp was done in a manner to enable the troop to operate as an entity and to grow its own leadership. And it goes back to the thing that Wint said in his opening remarks. The thing that was really radical here in its implementation was the idea that we would start back in the districts and we would work with the troops to develop who was going to be on the troop staff at camp. Who was going to be the scoutmaster? Who was going to be the assistant scoutmaster, and so forth. And then the troop staff and the troop